racist, misogynistic, homophobic. These words have been used to describe one person. Can you think of who that person might be? If you haven't figured it out yet, have been living under a rock for the past year and a half, I'll tell you who it is. None other than your president, Donald J. Trump. What if we lived in a world where just by calling a leader like Donald Trump crazy got us arrested and sent to jail? During World War II, Hitler established a youth group known as the Junior Gestapo agents. Now, the Junior Gestapo agents, they would basically go out and report any suspicious information they had on an individual back to Nazi officials. They spied on their friends, neighbors, teachers, and even their own family members. There was one instance of a young boy by the name of Walter Hess that even turned in his own father for calling Hitler a crazed lunatic in his household. His father was then arrested and sent off to Dachau concentration camp. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the novel-turned movie 1984. For those of you that have not read the book or seen the movie, I'll give a brief description of it. It's about a man named Winston living in a society where nearly every action he takes is being monitored and recorded by the government. In Winston's world, there's no freedom of expression, and just for speaking negatively about the government, you could be arrested and executed. Now, this sounds like a very scary world to live in, to have no freedom of expression, but the reality is that this sort of thing could happen in the very near future. After 9/11, the government decided that they needed to pass a law that would allow them to surveil their citizens to make sure nothing like this would ever happen again. To do so, they passed a law known as the Patriot Act. Now, the Patriot Act basically does just that, gives them the right to surveil people suspected of terrorism. According to the documents leaked by Edward Snowden, they're not just surveilling people suspected of terrorism, they're surveilling millions of citizens just like you and I. To do so, they use a secret computer program known as XKeyscore. Now, XKeyscore is basically a program that gathers huge quantities of computer data left behind by an individual. This includes texts, emails, conversations you could have, comments, anything, Skype calls even. They can tap into your webcam and observe you without your knowledge. You don't even have to turn on the green light to show there's a recording in process. Now, this makes me feel pretty uneasy because it's giving so much power to politicians and government officials. And as you all know, we cannot trust them all the time because they're constantly proving they have horrible integrity. I spoke earlier about the rise of Hitler and how he established the Junior Gestapo agents. I said how they went out and would spy and relay any suspicious information back to Nazi officials. I spoke and said, what if Donald Trump did this sort of thing? Now, I don't really think he would, but if he did, then everyone at CNN would be dead by now. I was just using this as an example, but there's no denying the United States has done this sort of thing in the past. During the height of the Civil Rights Movement, the U.S. government under Richard Nixon decided they wanted to destroy a civil rights group known as the Black Panthers. They would tap the phones of the Black Panther leaders, they would follow them around, arrest them, accuse them of false terrorist charges. They even went as far as assassinating one of their own leaders, Fred Hampton. The FBI ordered the police to raid their apartment and assassinate him and many of his friends. So in this situation, who are the real terrorists? To me, it's not the Black Panthers, it's the government agencies that use the police officers sometimes to do their dirty work. Which brings me to the next point, that not only is all this government surveillance bad for the American people, it's also ineffective in stopping terrorism. This man right here is Omar Mateen. Omar Mateen was monitored by the FBI for months and months. They tapped his phone, followed him around, saw where he shopped, saw his friends, and everything you could really do to spy on an individual. And during this amount of time, they decided that this man was not a threat to anybody. He wasn't really going to harm anyone, so they let him go and stopped observing him. He went on to commit the deadliest massacre in U.S. history since 9/11. He is the Orlando nightclub shooter that murdered 49 people and left 50 injured. So why is the government suppressing the rights of individuals like you and I that do not condone terrorism? We don't associate ourselves with terrorism, and we don't have terrorist ideas. It's not fair that our rights are being suppressed. So the main takeaway of all of this is we cannot permit the government to infringe on our rights on the false premise of stopping terrorism.